Podcast.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This is Ronald Johnson, Publitarian, coming at you again with another episode of Publitarian Podcast, your Tier 1 podcaster, just doing his humble job here. I've covered the Tier 1 stuff before, but in case you're a new listener to the podcast, I explain my podcast the way you deal with the cable company if you have to call them on the phone. You get the first person. You know, maybe they know what they're talking about, maybe they don't, but you really want to get to the Tier 3 person to know what they're talking about. So I am self-aware, and I call myself the Tier 1 podcaster. Tier 1 on customer service is at the bottom, not at the top. But I do appreciate you guys being here and listening to this podcast. I purposefully did not release an episode yesterday. Usually Tuesday is my target date for release. Tuesday obviously was the anniversary date of September 11th. I felt that I should give, people that are still mourning and dealing with loss just that respect and that time, and not dive into a bunch of 9/11 rhetoric. Same thing on my Instagram, social media, just a couple of respectful posts of never forget the September 11th, 2001 tragedies, as well as the 2012 Benghazi tragedy as well. And sometimes that gets lost in the shuffle. So just remembering both of those things. And I just wanted to keep it light, and I wasn't even going to get into the politics of September 11th or the conspiracy theories or anything else. And it seems like the world of social media has forced my hand on that issue. And I'm seeing two different things now on my social media as of yesterday. One, I'm seeing the typical, conspiracy theory stuff that gets thrown around, and that's fine. If you want to be a 9/11 quote truther, then that's your prerogative. Do that. This is America. I'm not here to shoot down every single one of your ideals and beliefs. So I was just letting it go, and as the day progressed, it started getting more and more vicious, more political, more adversarial, and this is on our side of the aisle. This isn't left versus right. This is sort of right-wing cannibalism, and I'm thinking about people that were alive during September 11th and people that experienced real loss, real hurt, real pain, real emotion, having what's been done to them reduced to some kind of political theater or conspiracy theory. And guys, as much as I think there is a deep state in the government, and I do love a good conspiracy theory, I don't think the day of the tragedy is a good time to be airing those grievances at people. And part two of what I wanted to talk about with that is with the Gen Zers. Guys, I'm glad you're here. I am glad you have been red-pilled. I am glad that you are the new counterculture, and I am glad that you are awakening and riding in this new wave of conservatism. I am thankful to God for you. At the same time, I saw some things yesterday that disturbed me. I saw right-wing Gen Z conservative accounts going, yeah, we need to politicize 9/11, or I don't know what the big deal is, and yada, yada, yada. Okay, you weren't around. That's why you don't know what the big deal is. And a lot of times, especially with the advent of the internet, knowledge is power, and unfortunately, bad knowledge or incorrect knowledge is destructive power. And knowledge can never take the place of wisdom and experience. So if you did not experience those emotions, if you do not have the wisdom of what came with that, I would say let people have their 9/11 and then resume back to your normal opinions on 9/12. Although this is America, this is a free country, you can say whatever you want, do whatever you want. Just out of respect, though, because there are a lot of people, myself included, I have a 9/11 story as well. I was not directly involved in New York. Thankfully, I did see the Twin Towers before they fell. I was in New York in 2001. It was actually just a couple of months before September 11th happened. I was working as a musician at the time, and I was working for a record label, and they had offices in New York and also Orlando, Florida. And the band I was with at the time, I worked as a hired gun for a record label, and I also had a band, as a lot of musicians do. And the band side portion happened to be in New York, and we were meeting with our record label and getting shopped. So I was glad to see the Twin Towers. It's impressive piece of architecture, had my nice America moment seeing those skyscrapers, and, went on about my day, not thinking that anything would ever happen to those two buildings. And so I didn't mean to dovetail into all that, but what I meant to say, especially to my Gen Z listeners, is there is still real emotion. There's still real pain there. And I think a passage of time has to happen before stuff like that can be approached. Now, that is just my own opinion on that. You can take that however you want. It's like we can talk about Pearl Harbor. It's okay. Anybody that experienced that is either no longer with us or 90 years old. I don't know. I just think that some time needs to pass before you start to politicize things. Or at the very least, wait until 9/12. Don't do it on 9/11. That's my 2 cents on that issue. Another takeaway from 9/11 that I realized shortly after the 9/11 tragedy happened, a lot of celebrities do what they do best and got together and had this nice little candlelight concert and everything. And it was good. But that concert was kind of my red pill moment, waking up, because I always knew Hollywood actors and entertainers, which is funny because I was in that industry, were liberal or leaned liberal, but they never really showed their colors that much, so to speak. And that tragedy and what happened afterwards, and then celebrities making their opinions known, really started waking me up to the depravity of the left. So now that it's 9/12 instead of 9/11, I would like to address some of the more popular conspiracy theories that surround this event. And let me be clear before I start. I do not trust the federal government at all. I don't trust any kind of government completely. So I want to get that out of the way before I start going into what unfortunately is going to be debunking a lot of these 9/11 myths. And I didn't even set out to do that, but this was me on social media yesterday, just seeing a lot of the nonsensical stuff that has been disproven that still, because of the internet, just still circulates around the globe and continues to go round and round. So I thought I would do my part here, at least with my audience, and just hit some of the high points of the 9/11 conspiracy or the 9/11 truth, and go through some of the more popular ones. I'm not going to knock down every single point. There's billions of them with billions of different takes. So I'm just going to hit like the highlights, and then we'll go from there. What I do want to say about the federal government is I think that the federal government was not a mastermind on 9/11. I think the federal government was just inept on 9/11. Now listen to what I'm saying about this. For any of my listeners that are driving age and above, have you ever been to the DMV? That's local government. That's not even federal government. Have you seen the idiocy at the DMV? Where just nobody knows what's going on, or somebody has to check with this person before they do that, and on and on and on. Just nobody cares. It's nobody's job. That's not their specific job. It's just like an entire office building of ineptitude. Now take that and multiply it greatly to a federal level. And that's what you have with federal government. You have an inept, in my humble opinion, federal government. I don't see a mastermind federal government pulling off something like 9/11. What I do think happened was some terrorists got together and decided to take us out in our points of strength, which would be our military, the Pentagon, an attempt at the White House or the Capitol, and our symbols of trade and commerce the World Trade Center? That seems more plausible to me. And as it's been said, a lot of times the simplest answer is the correct one. So before you guys, truthers, start tearing me apart and you have all these facts and data and things to throw at me, this is not going to be a show note heavy. I was going to go through and just link all of this stuff in the show notes, but I know for a fact that you guys aren't looking at the show notes that I put down. So I'm just going to run through some of these more popular ones, and then I'm just going to apply some common sense and logic, and then we'll just let the facts land where they land. As I said, the federal government, I think, was inept on that day, not a mastermind. But I do think, like Rahm Emanuel famously said, who used to work for President Obama and who is the current mayor of Chicago, never let a good crisis go to waste. I do think the federal government reacted, and they saw what happened on 9/11 and saw their chance to grow their power base and grow their voter base through the TSA. I can certainly go with you down that rabbit hole because I think that's exactly what happened. So that's point number one. Federal government inept, not a mastermind. So let me address the big one. This is the big one that still gets bandied about. This is like the takeaway one. Are you ready? Say it with me, guys. You can probably quote it right back to me. Jet fuel can't melt steel beams. Oh my gosh, how long have we heard that? Jet fuel cannot melt steel beams. That's talking about the Twin Towers and how they fell like a house of cards, and buildings don't fall like that, and jet fuel does not burn at the proper temperature to melt steel to do that kind of damage to buildings like the World Trade Center towers. Okay, so here we go. Part one of that. You're absolutely correct. Jet fuel cannot melt steel beams. We're talking about a degree of difference between 1500 degrees to 2700 degrees. So here's the news flash. I hope you're sitting down. Steel beams don't have to melt to be structurally weakened. I know, right? Crazy. So let me walk you through this. Oh, beer fridge is on. Cool. We have a happy beer fridge, by the way. There is beer in the beer fridge. Okay, you have a very tall building, multiple stories, made of tube steel construction. Don't worry guys, I'm not going to get too far into the weeds on this, but this building, tube steel construction, is basically this steel exoskeleton, and there are no concrete footers in between that separate these. They're not held together by concrete. They're only held together by steel. So you have this very strong exoskeleton that's all around the outside is just locked steel. There's no concrete, though, that holds all the steel together. It's only just steel footers that hold all this together. So if a jet crashes into a building, structurally weakens the steel, and then damages the exoskeleton, and you have no concrete footers in the middle, after those support beams get hot enough, not to melt, just to structurally weaken, then they're weakened at its weakest point. It's the same thing like saying a chain is only strong as its weakest link. The building can only stay up at its weakest point. So now you've got 17 to 23 floors of this same steel, this same weight, above this point that has now been weakened by a jet. Now, what's going to happen? You've got gravity, and you've got all the weight of those other floors. It'd be like you holding 23 of you above your head. Just saying you could do that. And somebody kicks you in the leg. It's all coming down, and it's coming down fast. So there was a scientist that ran all of this data. You can search him out on YouTube. He's not a crackpot. And he did a computer model of this, of all the variables, the weather, the type of steel that was used. He went through the means and ways of testing and all of the standards that they use, and ran computer simulations to see what would happen to these buildings. And guess what? It happened exactly on the computer simulation as how it happened in real life, with maybe a 2-second difference. He was surprised that they actually didn't fall down faster, exactly how they fell. So that's point one. You're dealing with tube steel construction, and there's no concrete in there that stops anything from coming down. So once it comes down straight, and it comes down fast. And those are the Twin Towers coming down. A jet hit the building, and the buildings came down. And I know there's CGI videos out there as well of there not being a jet there. There's definitely CGI videos, guys, but the CGI is working in the opposite direction. There's too much live TV, live coverage, even from sources like CNN and others, where people were live TV watching that jet hit. Too many videos of that jet hitting. They can't all be CGI'd. So just remove the CGI from your mind. It didn't happen. Guys, planes hit those buildings and they went down. And I'm going to move on to the next topic because I can already hear you arguing with me about Tower 7. So here we go. Oh, the infamous Tower 7. We've all seen that video. Pow, 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 and it all just comes down. Definitely a controlled demolition, right? That's definitely the staging area for the CIA and the FBI to mastermind this destruction, right?
Wrong.
That is absolutely
wrong.
So here's what's happened with Tower 7. By the fire department's own accounts of Tower 7, the chief, and multiple other accounts, debris from Tower 1, that's like flaming furniture, flaming debris, went into Tower 7 as the building was coming down. I mean, Tower 7's like 120 yards away. Flaming debris enters into Tower 7. And you're saying, Ronald, how can you believe that? There's video. There's video of it. It's either UK Daily Mail or BBC has a video of it. It didn't surface until years later, which is what, fueled the conspiracy theory. But somebody is seeing flames shooting out of Tower 7. Same thing, tube steel construction. That flaming furniture and other flaming debris enters the building, and the building starts to burn. Sprinkler systems don't kick in because the water main is broken. This is all documented evidence. Water main is broken, the building's burning, fire department's needed everywhere else. The fire chief himself said that they decided to just let it burn and let it go, and that they even saw a bulge happening from all the heat coming out of the building. So all the pop you're seeing are the windows exploding from all of that pressure and all of the heat. And the conspiracy theorists will point you to this infamous video now of something at the top just disappearing. And oh yeah, that's the FBI up there, demolishing their bomb and doing their thing. Again, if you know how the tube steel construction works, and with no integrity in the middle, once that building gets up to a certain amount of heat with no firefighting procedures in place at all, you're seeing an extremely hot inferno just burning out of control. So it's no miracle that the inside of the building would collapse first and then the exoskeleton just boom, go down right after it. There's no support. Again, this was debunked as well. There's a lot of popular mechanics websites that link to this that show, again, there's more computer simulations that point to this. The interior of that building collapsed. You see it in that conspiracy. You can even see it in the conspiracy theory video. You can see that penthouse portion go down first. It starts imploding from the middle, and then the whole building just comes down. It's gravity. It's physics. It's not a conspiracy theory. Okay, so that's the famous Tower 7 of how it wasn't touched, but it got touched. No, it got touched badly by building 1. There's video of it. Like I said, I'm not going to link all this in the show notes. When you guys do research this, like I know you're going to, the same rules apply with the rules that I gave you in episode 2 of when you're searching something on the internet. The first top results are going to be all of the 9/11 trutherconspiracy.com websites. Usually the more ridiculous sounding the website, that's the one you need to stay away from. So if you do some research on this, you're going to see that this was just physics in action and not some nefarious government plot. Okay, so that's Tower 7. What else do we got? The F-16 killing the, knocking the plane out of the sky in Pennsylvania. That's a really good one because this dude was on Alex Jones. Again, not to throw shade at Alex Jones because he is partially responsible for my red pill moment, which got me believing in the deep state. But not everything on his show was gospel. I mean, let's just be real, guys. So anyway, he had this guy on his show that was like, I know the pilot's name, and he was in that F-16, and he fired 2 missiles and took that plane down. Okay, so the guy's name that he mentions, Rebney or Bemney, the guy, he is a real pilot. He was in an F-16 that day. The guy had his rank wrong, and he was on the other side of the country. The pilot himself has been approached by this, and he was like, look, I don't want to fuel any more conspiracy theory stuff, so I'm just not going to comment on this stuff. But there is documented to the minute where this guy was. He wasn't an F-16, but he was in North Dakota helping one of the leaders from NORAD organize help and relief. So that guy wasn't anywhere near. And plus, why would you shoot down a civilian plane? Like, what does that do for you exactly? I mean, just use some common sense with that one, guys. Here's another favorite one, the Pentagon conspiracy. They only have supposedly one piece of camera footage that shows something hitting the side of the Pentagon building, and it is a cruise missile. It's not a jet. Okay, I can actually speak some experience to this because a lot of my living was made installing CCTV cameras, and I do know that recording rate plays a big deal into this. It's why, like, if you look at the police cruiser on that now famous footage, it looks like the police cruiser is kind of teleporting, and that's what you're seeing in this too. Again, I'm sorry, I hate to be just ruining people's days because I know they want the government conspiracy thing to be real, but a plane really did hit that building. So not only do we have video of something hitting the building, you can say it was a cruise missile, whatever. And then the other famous thing is you'll find a group of pictures on the internet that people are pointing to saying famously, I don't see any jet wreckage here, do you? Yes, there is jet wreckage. All you have to do is just do an image search. You don't even have to dig deep. Do an image search. Pentagon, 9/11. You'll see tail pieces. You'll see like logos. There's stuff all over. And I think all the pictures you're seeing are like aftermath after they were cleaning up the wreckage. There's also account after account of people that were actually there and witnessed these things and saw the Pentagon and the plane. One of the eyewitnesses that was on site, who was like one of the first responders, said, yes, there was a plane. Yes, it had windows, because that's another popular thing too, that, okay, well, maybe it was a plane, but it wasn't a passenger plane. He's like, yes, there was a plane. Yes, there was windows. Yes, there were people's body parts. And because I had to clean up a lot of that stuff. There's just too many eyewitnesses of saying that they saw this. And then another popular one having to do with the Pentagon crash is, well, look at the size of the hole. A jet doesn't make that. What is this, the Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote? Do you think like if something hits the side of a building, it's going to make like a plane-sized hole? No, it's going to take its point of impact, and that's going to be the size of the hole, plus some extra around each side. Guys, a plane hit that building. There's too many documented evidence pieces of actual real people seeing people and parts of planes. And all you're basing your knowledge on is some pictures on the internet of either some cleanup or some aftermath. There's flight recordings. There's actual recordings of things happening on that plane. There's loved ones calling other loved ones saying, we're going down. It would be too much to cover up to make a conspiracy theory with not much reward. All right, so there's that one. Here's another good one that I saw yesterday, the Zim Shipping Company. The Zim Shipping Company, who is supposedly half owned by another good demon on the right, the Rothschilds. The Rothschilds are supposedly this big global family that's run the world and financed every war since the beginning of time. Whatever. You can believe whatever you want to on that. But the simple matter with the Zim Shipping Company is that their lease ran out on the World Trade Center. That's why they got out. People go like, oh, they had knowledge, and the Rothschilds had knowledge, and they knew it was going to happen. No, their lease was literally up. Their lease was up in September of 2001. They did not renew their lease. Matter of fact, after doing some digging, there were some Zim employees that actually died in the World Trade Center and some of their equipment. So if they had foreknowledge and they were pulling out of there because they knew about the 9/11 that was going to happen, don't you think they would have taken their employees and their equipment with them? Again, it's just another easily disproved hoax. Well, anyway, I already went over my time on this. I try to keep these podcasts at 20 minutes. So I'm just going to leave you with some final thoughts on this. I think people want the conspiracy on both sides of the aisle. I think people want the conspiracy. That way it absorbs them from any critical thinking. They want to believe that the government is this shadowy group in control of everything. Now, I do believe there is indeed a deep state, for sure. There's a deep state that wants power, but I don't think it's this global, creepy, Illuminati organization. Maybe it is. Maybe I'm the idiot. All I'm saying is any example of government and bureaucracy that I've seen is not a model of efficiency that could carry out something like this. The federal government can't, even local government can't find their freaking ass with two hands and a flashlight. So I can't see them masterminding this just to create the TSA and strip us of our liberties. If they want to strip us of our liberties, they can do that anyway. I think they, like I said, seized on that opportunity and made it happen. And they may have heard some chatter about something taking place in September. But the bottom line is we did not have the government infrastructure in place to give us warnings of that. People like to point to NORAD and why jets weren't scrambled and why we didn't know about this and that. At the time, pre 9/11, the world was different. We were looking outwards for threats, not inwards. If a terrorist ever did hijack a plane, they would just fly you to Cuba and then you would go home. The protocol would be to cooperate with the terrorists. So what happened? The terrorists take over the plane, they shut off their transponder, and then a federal employee has to go through about 4,500 different radar blips trying to find what plane is where. And then according to NORAD's own account, back then, a federal employee that oversees, the commercial flying would have to physically pick up the phone and make a phone call to NORAD to warn them about anything. So that's why there was no jets on scramble or anything else. We just did not have the infrastructure in place to do that. I went too long on that segment again. I was trying to wrap this up. But anyway, I think people just want the conspiracy. It absolves them from any kind of critical thinking. That way, if they screw up in their life, no matter what they do, they don't have to make a difference because there's always just going to be this all-powerful nanny government that is really secretly in control of things. And I think that's why they want it. I think there's just a-holes at the top that like power and money. That's your government. That's your big government conspiracy. That's overt. That's what you can see. There's just buttholes at the top that like power and money. But at the same time, I think they're too inept to carry out something like this. Again, people want and need that conspiracy. It absolves them from having to do anything to challenge the government. It will just give them this feeling of being powerless, and they can just stay complacent because they have an excuse to stay complacent. A person is intelligent. People together are not, which is why we do not have a democracy, people. It's why the Founding Fathers were so brilliant to make this representative republic, this representative constitutional republic that we have, because they know that people en masse are idiots and sheep and they can just get whipped into a frenzy. It's why they constructed the country the way they did. That way we have representatives that are supposedly supposed to represent us. That way there's no mob rule. We just can't change our mind one day, get whipped into a lather, and plunge ourselves into totalitarianism or anarchy, for that matter. Another thing that plays into it is I think conservatives and right-wingers have such distrust of the government anyway, and rightly so. They're always in our pockets and in our business. That they're more easily susceptible to these kind of conspiracy theories because they believe the government to be this great global evil. And let's be honest, it is. But I also know it's inept as well, going back to my original talking point. So anyway, guys, this podcast went a little bit longer than I wanted it to. I just wanted to address some of the bigger conspiracy theories that are out there. And if you just do some digging on the internet and get past the first 5 or 10 results of all the weird named websites, you'll do some digging and actually see that the simplest answer is the correct one. That some pissed off Saudi Arabians and Muslims hijacked a plane or 3 and tried to hit us at our most powerful and most vulnerable at the time points. And the federal government is inept but not stupid, and they took advantage of it and created the TSA, and we have to deal with all the BS at the lines at airlines that we do nowadays. I think that's really the simplest answer, guys. If you want to challenge me on it, you can, but I was just really disappointed yesterday, especially from our side of the aisle. I expect it from liberals, but just the vitriol, the hate, the name calling coming from people yesterday on our side of the aisle, I thought was atrocious. So on that front, just be better, guys. Just be better than that, especially, on 9/11 when people are grieving and mourning and going through real loss and real pain and suffered real issues because of that. Anyway, that will do it for me. I am Publitarian@gmail.com or thepublitarian@gmail.com. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you on the next podcast.